The boy's voice came small and tight, like something caught in barbed wire. "That woman's shadow has two heads." Caleb Marsh didn't look up from the fence post he was hammering. The August heat pressed down on the ranch like a hand over a mouth, and his shirt clung to his back in dark patches. He'd been working since dawn, replacing posts the storm had torn loose, and the sun had climbed high enough to bleach the color from everything. "You hear me, Mr. Marsh?" This time Caleb paused, hammer mid-swing. He turned slowly, sweat running into his beard. The boy, Tommy Brennan, the preacher's youngest, stood 20 yards off, near the water trough, his frame thin and sun-darkened against the white fence rails. He wasn't looking at Caleb. He was staring past him, toward the main house. "What you say?" Tommy didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on something Caleb couldn't see yet, and his hands had gone still at his sides in that particular way. Children go still when they've seen something that doesn't fit the world they know. "Her shadow," Tommy said again, quieter now. "It's got two heads." Caleb set the hammer down slow and deliberate, the way a man does when he's deciding whether to believe something or dismiss it. He'd hired Tommy for the summer to help with the ranch work. Good kid, steady hands, never complained about the heat or the hours. But kids saw things sometimes, made up stories when the sun got too high and their minds went soft. Still, Caleb turned to follow the boy's gaze. The woman stood in the yard between the barn and the house, maybe 50 feet from where they worked. She was facing away from them, motionless, her traveling cloak pulled tight despite the heat. She'd arrived that morning just after sunrise, knocked on the door while Caleb was still pulling on his boots, said her name was Vera, said her wagon had broken an axle 2 miles south and she'd walked the rest of the way. Asked if she could rest a few hours, maybe buy some water and a meal before moving on. Caleb had said yes. He always did. The ranch sat far enough from town that travelers came through regular, and he'd learned long ago that hospitality in harsh country wasn't charity, it was covenant. But now, standing in the midday glare with Tommy's words hanging in the air, Caleb looked at the woman's shadow, and his mouth went dry. The shadow stretched long across the dust, thrown sharp by the overhead sun. It should have been simple, a single silhouette, head and shoulders, and the drape of her cloak. But it wasn't simple. There were two shapes where her head should be. One profile faced left, distinct and clear. The other faced right, slightly smaller, like something pressed close behind the first. Both cast in the same unbroken line of shadow, both connected to the same body. Caleb blinked hard, rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. The double shape remained. "You see it too?" Tommy whispered. Caleb didn't answer. His heart had started beating in a different rhythm, not fast, but heavier, like a hammer on an anvil. He watched the woman. She hadn't moved, hadn't turned, just stood there in the yard, perfectly still, as if waiting for something, or listening. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the open ground, and the shadow rippled but didn't change. Still, two heads. Still, wrong. "Mr. Marsh," Tommy's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Caleb's hand drifted to his hip, where his gun belt hung. He'd strapped it on that morning out of habit, always did when he worked the far fences, but now his fingers brushed the grip of the Colt like it was an anchor. He didn't draw. Not yet. But he felt the weight of it, solid and certain. "Stay here," Caleb said quietly. "But, stay. Here." Tommy nodded, his face pale beneath the sun-browned skin. Caleb started walking toward the woman, slow and measured. His boots crunched in the dry earth, loud in the stillness. The closer he got, the clearer the shadow became. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't dust or heat shimmer. There were two distinct profiles in that shadow, both human, both too real to ignore. He stopped 10 feet behind her. "Ma'am." She didn't turn. "Ma'am, I need you to face me." For a long moment, nothing. Then, slowly, so slowly it seemed like the world itself was turning, the woman pivoted. Caleb's hand tightened on the Colt. Her face was pale, angular, older than he'd thought when he'd seen her that morning. Dark hair pulled back tight, eyes that looked black in the sunlight, or maybe just hollow. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at him with an expression that wasn't quite blank but wasn't quite anything else either. "Your shadow," Caleb said, keeping his voice level. "It's not right." Her eyes flicked down briefly, as if checking something she already knew was there. When she looked back up, her mouth moved, but the words came out delayed, like an echo reaching him a second late. "I know." The hairs on Caleb's arms stood up. "What are you?" he asked. She tilted her head just slightly, just enough, and for a moment, Caleb could have sworn he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not a reflection, not light. Something else, something watching. I'm what's left, she said. The wind died completely. The air went thick and still, and in that silence, Caleb heard it a second breath, faint, barely there, but unmistakable. It came from the woman, but not from her mouth, from somewhere else, somewhere close. Behind her? Inside her? Caleb drew his gun. The motion was smooth, practiced, the Colt clearing leather and leveling at her chest in one clean pull. The hammer clicked back, loud as a bone breaking. Don't move, he said. The woman, Vera, if that was even her name, didn't flinch. She just stood there, hands loose at her sides, looking at him with those hollow eyes. And her shadow, stretched long on the ground between them, rippled once. Both heads turned to face him. Put it down, Mr. Marsh. Caleb didn't lower the gun, didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the woman, but his awareness had split half on her face, half on that impossible shadow that seemed to breathe on its own. I said, don't move. I haven't, she replied, and her voice was calm, empty of fear. But your hand's shaking. It was. Just barely. Not from fear, Caleb. Marsh hadn't shaken from fear since he was a younger man, but from something older. Instinct, maybe. The part of the body that knows when it's standing too close to something it shouldn't touch. Behind him, he heard Tommy's boots scuffing in the dirt. The boy hadn't stayed put. Tommy, Caleb said without turning. Go to the house. Get inside. Lock the door. But now. The boy hesitated, then ran. Caleb listened to the footsteps fade, heard the porch boards creak, heard the door slam. Good. Whatever this was, the kid didn't need to see more of it. The woman's gaze flicked past Caleb toward the house, then back. You're afraid of me. I'm careful, Caleb corrected. There's a difference. Is there? There is when a stranger shows up with a shadow that ain't hers. For the first time, something like emotion crossed her face, faint, fleeting, too quick to name. Sadness, maybe. Or exhaustion. It is mine, she said quietly. Just, not only mine. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd heard stories his whole life, stories the old-timers told around fires, stories the Comanche and Apache shared when they traded at the posts. Stories of things that walked with two spirits, things that weren't whole, weren't clean. He'd never believed them. Until now. What happened to you? He asked. The woman looked down at her shadow again, and this time her expression shifted. There was recognition there. Grief, maybe. She raised one hand slowly, carefully, so Caleb wouldn't shoot, and touched her own chest, just above her heart. I died, she said, 3 years ago, out near the canyon lands. A man killed me. Caleb's finger hovered over the trigger. You don't look dead. I'm not. Not anymore. That doesn't make sense. No, she agreed. It doesn't. The silence stretched thin between them. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, sharp and lonely. The sun pressed down, relentless, but Caleb felt cold. Someone brought you back, he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Who? My sister. Caleb glanced at the shadow again. 2 heads, 2 profiles. The second one, he realized now, was smaller, younger. She's still with you, he said slowly. Yes. Inside you? Beside me, behind me. I don't always know. The woman's voice cracked, just slightly, and for the first time Caleb saw the weight she carried, the exhaustion, the grief, the wrongness of being something that shouldn't exist. She gave up everything to pull me back. Her breath, her name, her shadow. She tied herself to me so I wouldn't slip away again. Why? Because I'm all she had left. Caleb lowered the gun. Not all the way, just enough to ease the tension in his arm. His mind was working fast now, sorting through the implications. If what she was saying was true, if this woman was walking around with her sister's spirit bound to her own, then she wasn't a threat. She was a tragedy. But the West had taught Caleb that tragedies could be dangerous too. What do you want? He asked. To rest, she said simply. Just for a day, maybe 2. Then I'll move on. Where? Away. Somewhere no one knows me. Somewhere I can be quiet. Caleb studied her face. There was no deception in it that he could see. No malice. Just a woman, 2 women, maybe trying to survive something impossible. He holstered the gun. The woman's shoulders sagged, just a fraction, like she'd been holding her breath. You can stay, Caleb said, but you sleep in the barn, not the house. And you don't go near the boy. I understand. I see that shadow do anything I don't like. I will put a bullet in you. You understand that too? She nodded. Caleb turned and started walking back toward the house. his mind already racing ahead. He'd have to explain this to Tommy, somehow calm the kid down, make sure he didn't run to town with stories. He'd have to watch the woman, make sure she kept her word, and he'd have to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do if trouble came looking for her, because trouble always came looking. He was halfway to the porch when the woman called out behind him. "Mr. Marsh?" He stopped, turned. "Thank you." He didn't respond, just tipped his hat slightly and kept walking. Inside the house, Tommy was pressed against the kitchen window, eyes wide. Caleb pushed through the door and set his hat on the table. "She stayin'?" Tommy asked, voice tight. "For now." "But her shadow." "I know what her shadow looks like." Caleb poured himself water from the pitcher, drank it in one long pull. "She's not dangerous, just different." "Different how?" Caleb set the cup down, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people carry things they shouldn't have to carry. That woman's carrying something heavy. We're gonna let her rest, and then she'll be gone." Tommy didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Outside, through the window, Caleb watched the woman walk slowly toward the barn. Her shadow followed long, dark, and split at the head like a forked tongue. He wondered if she'd ever be free of it. He wondered if she even wanted to be. By nightfall, the sky had turned the color of old copper, and the first whispers started in town. A rider had passed through, heading south, said he'd seen a woman with a strange shadow walking the canyon road, said people were looking for her. Caleb heard the news from his neighbor, who'd ridden out to check on a fence line they shared. The man had lingered at the property line, eyes flicking toward the barn, voice low. "You seen anyone like that?" he'd asked. Caleb had lied, said no. But as he watched his neighbor ride away, he felt the weight of that lie settle in his chest. Trouble was coming. He just didn't know how fast. They came at dawn. Caleb heard the hoofbeats before he saw them, steady, deliberate, the sound of men who weren't in a hurry because they didn't need to be. He was already awake, sitting on the porch with coffee going cold in his hand, watching the eastern sky turn from black to gray to pale gold. He'd slept poorly, kept waking to silence that felt too thick, too watched. Twice he'd gotten up and looked out toward the barn, half expecting to see something he couldn't explain. But the barn had stayed dark, the woman inside it hidden or asleep or just still. Now, in the thin morning light, Caleb set his cup down and stood. 5 riders crested the low ridge to the south, moving in a loose line. Even from a distance, Caleb could read their shapes, the way they sat their horses, the way they carried their rifles across their saddles. Not lawmen, not ranchers, hunters. Caleb stepped off the porch and walked to the middle of the yard, his hand resting easy on his gun belt. Behind him, he heard the door creak open. Tommy stepped out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Who's that?" the boy asked. "Don't know yet. Get back inside." "But—" "Inside, Tommy. Now." The boy hesitated, then obeyed. The door clicked shut. The riders came on slow, their horses' breath steaming in the cool air. They were close enough now that Caleb could see details: dusty hats, hard faces, the glint of metal. The man in the center rode a big roan gelding and sat like he owned the world. When they reached the edge of Caleb's property, he raised one hand and the line stopped. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the man on the roan nudged his horse forward, closing the distance until he was 20 feet from Caleb. He was older, maybe 50, with a gray beard and eyes that looked like they'd stopped caring about things a long time ago. "Morning," the man said. His voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. "Morning," Caleb replied evenly. "Name's Garrett. We're tracking someone." "That's so." "Woman. Travels alone. Dark hair, pale face. Got herself a peculiar shadow." Caleb kept his expression flat. "Lot of women travel through here." Garrett smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This one's different. You'd know if you saw her." "Why are you looking for her?" "That's our business." "It's my business if you're on my land asking questions." Garrett's smile faded. He leaned forward slightly in the saddle, and Caleb saw the other riders shift subtle movements, hands drifting toward weapons. The air went tight. "She's a thief," Garrett said. "Stole something that don't belong to her." "What'd she steal?" "Her life." The words hung there, heavy and wrong. Caleb felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his face still. "Don't know what that means," he said. "Means she was dead and someone pulled her back. Used old magic, bad magic, the kind that breaks things." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "The kind that leaves marks." "Marks," Caleb repeated. "On her shadow." Caleb didn't respond. Didn't need to. Garrett was watching him now, the way a hawk watches a rabbit patient, certain, waiting for the tell. "She's here, isn't she?" Garrett said quietly. Don't lie to me, friend. We tracked her to this property, saw where she came in yesterday morning, saw where she stayed." He gestured vaguely toward the barn. "We just want to talk to her. That why you brought 5 men, and enough rifles to start a war?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "She's dangerous. She's a woman who asked for water and rest. She's an abomination." The word came out flat and final, and Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't about theft. This wasn't even about magic. This was about fear, about men who decided something didn't belong in the world and appointed themselves to erase it. Caleb had seen it before, during the war, after the war, men who drew lines and enforced them with bullets. He took a slow breath, then spoke carefully. "She's under my roof," he said. "That makes her my guest. You want to talk to her, you ask me first," politely. Garrett stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed a short, humorless sound. "You know what she is? I know she's not hurting anyone. She's not natural. Neither's a lot of things," Caleb said. "Doesn't give you the right to hunt her." Garrett's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Behind Garrett, one of the other riders spoke up, a younger man with a scar across his jaw. "We could just take her, Garrett. He's one man." Caleb's hand moved to his gun. Not fast, not threatening, just there. "I'm one man on my own land," he said quietly, "with a rifle in the house, another in the barn, and enough ammunition to make this real unpleasant for all of you." The scarred man sneered. "You'd die for her?" "I'd kill for her," Caleb said. "There's a difference." The air went still. Even the horses seemed to sense it, ears flicking, hooves shifting. Garrett held up a hand, stopping his men before they could move. "Easy," he said. Then to Caleb, "You're protecting something you don't understand. I understand hospitality. I understand decency. That's enough." Garrett studied him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "You're a fool. Been called worse. When this goes bad, and it will, don't come crying to us." "Wasn't planning to." Garrett pulled his horse around, motioning for the others to follow. They turned as a group, moving back toward the ridge. But before they crested it, Garrett stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "We'll be watching," he called. "She leaves, we'll know." Then they were gone, disappearing over the rise like smoke. Caleb stood in the yard for a long time, listening to the silence. His heart was hammering now, adrenaline catching up to him. He'd just made an enemy of 5 armed men for the sake of a woman he didn't know, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Behind him, the barn door creaked open. The woman Vera stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. She'd heard everything. Caleb could see it in her eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Caleb turned to face her. "Yes, I did. They'll come back. I know." She stepped out into the yard, and her shadow stretched long in the morning light. 2 heads, clear as day. "I should leave," she said, "before someone gets hurt." Caleb shook his head. "You leave now. They'll catch you before you make it a mile. You stay. At least we've got walls. Got ground we can defend. This isn't your fight. It is now." She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Thank you," she said. Caleb didn't answer, just turned and walked back toward the house, his mind already working through what needed to be done. He had until nightfall, maybe less, to prepare. And when they came back, and they would come back, he'd be ready. They spent the afternoon in silence, mostly. Caleb moved through the ranch with purpose, checking ammunition, loading rifles, positioning supplies where he could reach them fast if things went bad. He sent Tommy into town with a note for the sheriff, though he didn't expect much help from that quarter. The law in these parts was thin as creek water in August, and Garrett's kind had a way of operating just outside its reach. The woman Vera stayed in the barn at first, keeping to herself, but around midday, Caleb saw her come out. She moved slow, uncertain, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. He was carrying feed sacks into the storage shed when she approached. "Can I help?" she asked. Caleb paused, a sack over his shoulder. He studied her for a moment, the way she held herself, the exhaustion in her eyes, and then nodded toward the water barrels. "Those need filling," he said. "Pumps by the well." She set to work, without another word. They labored side by side for the next hour, not speaking, just moving through the rhythms of ranch work. Caleb found himself glancing at her shadow from time to time, watching the way it shifted and moved. Both heads stayed distinct, one always facing forward, the other turned slightly, as if watching something just out of sight. It should have unnerved him. Instead, it just made him sad. By late afternoon, the heat had peaked, and the air hung heavy. Caleb set down the last of the tools and wiped his face with his sleeve. Vera finished filling the final barrel and straightened, breathing hard. "You didn't have to help," Caleb said. "I wanted to." "Why?" She looked at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw something other than grief in her face. Gratitude, maybe. Or just the simple human need to be useful. "Because you're risking everything for me," she said. "The least I can do is carry water." Caleb nodded slowly. "Come on, you should eat." They walked to the house together, their shadows stretching long in the golden light. Inside, Caleb put together a simple meal: bread, dried meat, beans from the night before. They ate at the table, the quiet broken only by the scrape of spoons on tin plates. Tommy was still in town, wouldn't be back until evening. It was just the two of them. After a while, Vera spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you help me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Caleb set down his spoon, thinking. It was a fair question. He'd asked himself the same thing more than once since Garrett and his men had left. "I knew a man once," he said finally. "During the war. Good man, brave. But he got injured bad, lost an arm, half his face burned. When he came home, people looked at him different, like he wasn't a man anymore, just a thing, something broken." He paused, the memory settling in his chest like a stone. He died a year later, not from his wounds, from being alone, from being treated like he wasn't worth anything. Caleb looked up at her. "I swore after that I wouldn't be the kind of man who turns away from something just because it's hard to look at." Vera's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry, just nodded. "Your sister," Caleb said after a moment. "The one who brought you back. What was her name?" "Eliza. She loved you." "Yes. And now she's with you, all the time." Vera's hand moved to her chest again, that same gesture from before. "I feel her. Sometimes I hear her. Not words, exactly. Just presence. Like she's standing just behind me, close enough to touch. Does it hurt?" "No," she hesitated. "But it's lonely." "How can you be lonely if she's with you?" "Because I'm not whole. And neither is she. We're two halves trying to be one person, and it doesn't fit right." Her voice dropped. "I think she's fading, a little more every day. And when she's gone," she didn't finish, but she didn't need to. "You'll be alone again," Caleb said quietly. "Yes." They sat in silence after that, the weight of it pressing down like the afternoon heat. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the land in shades of amber and rust. Finally, Vera spoke again. "If Garrett comes back when he comes back, I don't want you to fight him." Caleb looked at her sharply. "I already told you." "I know what you told me, but I'm telling you now. If it comes to that, let me go. Let them take me. I'm not worth dying for. That's not your choice to make. It's my life." "Not anymore," Caleb said, and his voice was hard now. "You're on my land, under my roof. That means I decide who stays and who goes. Not Garrett, not his men. Me." Vera stared at him, something fierce and fragile in her expression. "Why does it matter so much to you?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. He thought about the war again, about the men he'd killed and the men he'd saved, about the choices he'd made that kept him awake at night, and the choices he'd made that let him sleep. "Because if I let them take you," he said finally, "I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have done something and didn't, and I've got enough ghosts already. I don't need another." Vera's breath hitched, just slightly. She reached across the table slowly, carefully, and placed her hand over his. Her skin was cold, but her grip was firm. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded. He didn't pull his hand away. They sat like that for a long moment, two people carrying weight that wasn't theirs alone anymore. Outside, the sun touched the horizon. The shadows grew long and deep, and somewhere in the distance, Caleb thought he heard the faint sound of hoofbeats. He stood, pulling his hand back gently. "Get to the barn," he said. "Stay low. Don't come out until I tell you." Vera rose without argument, her face pale but resolute. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "If I don't get to say it later," she said quietly. "You're a good man, Caleb Marsh." Then she was gone, slipping out into the fading light. Caleb watched her go, watched her shadow split and merge with the darkness. Then he turned, picked up his rifle, and walked to the window. The hoofbeats were closer now. He checked the chamber, made sure it was loaded, and waited. Night was coming, and so were they. They came with torches. Caleb saw them from the window, 6 riders this time, not 5, moving slow up the road with flames held high. The fire turned their faces into masks, all shadow and sharp edges. Garrett rode at the front, his posture rigid, his rifle across his saddle. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, his own rifle in hand. He didn't raise it, not yet, just held it loose and ready, the way a man does when he wants peace but won't beg for it. The riders stopped 30 feet from the house. The torches hissed and crackled in the silence. "Last chance, Marsh," Garrett called out. "Send her out, and we'll leave you be." "Can't do that," Caleb said. "Then you're choosing her over your own life." "I'm choosing what's right." Garrett shook his head slowly. "There's no right here. Only what is and what shouldn't be. That woman's an abomination. Her sister broke laws older than this territory to bring her back. Someone has to set it straight." "Why you?" Caleb asked. "What makes you judge and jury?" "Because no one else will do it." "Maybe there's a reason for that." Garrett's face hardened. He raised his hand, and the riders behind him shifted, spreading out in a loose arc. The torches swung, casting wild shadows across the ground. "One last time," Garrett said. "Give her to us." Caleb lifted his rifle. Just enough. Not aimed, just present. No. For a long moment, nobody moved. The night hung balanced on a knife's edge. Then the barn door swung open. Vera stepped out into the firelight. "Wait," she called, her voice clear and steady. "Wait." Caleb's heart lurched. "Vera, get back." "No." She walked forward, hands raised, empty. She moved past Caleb, past the porch, until she stood alone in the yard between the house and the riders. Her shadow stretched long behind her, illuminated by torchlight. Both heads visible. Both clear. "I'll go with you," she said. "Just leave him alone." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Smart woman." "No." Caleb moved off the porch, but Vera turned and looked at him. Just one look, but it stopped him cold. There was something in her expression he couldn't name. Resolve, maybe, or release. "It's all right," she said quietly. "It's not." "Yes, it is." She turned back to Garrett. "You want to kill me because of what I am, because I'm not natural, because my sister loved me enough to break the world for me." Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "But you're wrong about one thing." "What's that?" Garrett asked. "I'm not the abomination. You are." Garrett's face twisted. You hunt people who are different. You hurt them, kill them, call it justice." She took a step forward. "But I know what you are, Garrett. I know what you've done. I've seen the graves. The men and women you've murdered because they didn't fit, because they scared you." Garrett's hand moved to his gun. "You don't know anything. My sister sees everything." Vera's voice rose now, sharp and fierce. "She's been watching you, following you, waiting for this moment." The riders shifted uneasily. One of the torches flickered and went out. "You're lying," Garrett said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Vera smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Am I?" Then she did something Caleb would never forget. She reached up and touched her own face gently, reverently, and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air around her seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off stone. Her shadow rippled, moved, and the second head detached. It pulled free from the first, rising slowly like smoke, a shape translucent, pale, barely there formed beside Vera. A girl, young, maybe 17. Her face was soft and kind, but her eyes burned. Eliza. Garrett's horse reared. The riders cursed, pulling back. One of them dropped his torch, and it guttered out in the dust. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. The ghost, Eliza's ghost, turned toward Garrett. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere and nowhere, layered and hollow. "You killed her," she said, 3 years ago, near the canyon. You and your men. You called her a witch, and you put a bullet in her." Garrett's face had gone white. That's not... You didn't even bury her. You left her for the crows. She was my sister." Eliza's voice cracked, and for a moment the ghost flickered, almost fading. Vera swayed, but stayed upright. "And I brought her back because you took everything from me. Because you had no right." Garrett raised his rifle, hands shaking. "You're damned, both of you." "Then damn me," Eliza said. "But you'll answer first." The ghost moved fast, faster than anything living, and the torches went out one by one, plunging the yard into darkness. Caleb heard shouts, The scream of horses, the thunder of hooves as the riders scattered. He saw shapes moving in the dark. Eliza, or something like her, circling them, pressing close. Then a gunshot. 1, 2. Silence. When Caleb's eyes adjusted, he saw Garrett on the ground, his horse gone, his rifle 10 feet away. He was scrambling backward, face twisted in terror. Eliza hovered above him, barely visible, a whisper of light and shadow. "Please," Garrett gasped. "Please, go," Eliza said. "Run. And if you ever come back, if you ever hurt anyone like my sister again, I'll find you. And I won't stop." Garrett didn't need to be told twice. He lurched to his feet and ran, stumbling into the darkness. The other riders were already gone, their torches scattered and dead. Eliza turned to Vera. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other, sister and sister, spirit and flesh. Then Eliza reached out and touched Vera's face, and the light around her dimmed. "I'm tired," Eliza whispered. "I know," Vera said, tears streaming down her face. "I have to go. I know. I love you. I love you too." The ghost faded, slowly, gently, like dawn dissolving night. And when she was gone, Vera collapsed. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground. 3 weeks later, Vera left. She'd stayed long enough to heal, long enough for the bruises to fade, and her strength to return. Caleb had offered to let her stay longer, even permanently, but she'd refused. "I need to move," she'd said. "I need to keep going. Eliza's gone, but I carry her memory. I owe her that much." Caleb understood. On the morning she left, he packed her saddlebags with food and water. Tommy came out to say goodbye, shy but sincere. Vera hugged him, then turned to Caleb. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "You're welcome," Caleb replied. "You ever need a place, you know where to find me." She smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd arrived. Then she mounted her horse and rode west, toward the mountains. Caleb watched her go until she was just a speck on the horizon. Then he turned and walked back to the house. Her shadow, he noticed, had only one head now. Years later, people would still talk about the woman with the strange shadow, the one who'd stood against Garrett and his men and lived. Some said she was a ghost. Some said she was a saint. Caleb never corrected them. He just remembered the way she'd looked in the firelight, standing alone but not afraid. And he hoped, wherever she was, she'd found peace.